Point out that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder how gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Energy Week with George Harvey, me. I always introduce myself before Tom, with the amazing Tom Fennell and me.
Up on the screen.
What?
I'm up on the screen.
You're up on the screen. We're obviously very professional about how we do things here. I go to the internet every day and get whatever articles I can find that are related to energy and climate change, and the ones that are interesting, I produce a 50 or 55 word synopsis and a link to the original article. A group of 10 to 15 of those is packaged together in a posting that goes up at my blog every day. And that blog is geoharvey.com. It's been going on since the 2nd of June, 2012. And before that, for about a little over a year, I was doing the same thing, but producing my results by email. But I decided that it would make sense to make it available to everybody. And so once a week, on a Thursday morning usually, Tom and I get together and we produce the best of the blog, as Tom always says.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Since I introduced you first, or at least tried, I'll say the best of the blog. And that is something we turn into this show.
Well, I usually mention something about this time that some of these articles are really good and in depth.
Yeah.
And we could even spend a whole show.
We could.
On some of these alone.
We could.
So some of these are well worth looking at on your own after you see our show.
Yes.
And I'll try and alert you to some of them because some of them are really worth looking at.
We'll try to alert you to any that are not worth looking at, too.
Well, you want to start here with
cracks
a
in the Taj
from
Mahal.
The Taj Mahal.
Yeah, there is a
up
picture
here,
from the Taj Mahal. And whoops, there you go. And
you still don't have it.
You still don't have it.
No.
There you got it. This is an article from BBC.
It's called Twilight of the Taj. And that is a picture of the wall of the Taj Mahal, which, by the way, I have visited.
Have you?
Yeah, it's one of the most beautiful sights. I saw it in daylight. I saw it at full moon.
Wow.
It's very impressive. At least it was. I mean, that was
well, I think it
1970.
Still is. Yeah, it still is.
Well, it still is, but it's on its way out. That's what this article is all about.
The article is about. That picture of the wall at the Taj Mahal, obviously you can see a big crack in it.
Absolutely.
And as a matter of fact, if you look closely, you can see that crack has already been repaired at least once. There's mortar right at the bottom. You can see the mortar along the crack, and as you go up, you can see that the mortar's chipped. But this wall has moved since that mortar was put in.
Well, we'll mention a little bit why that's happening. So let's a little blurb you got to give us here.
Pollution has other effects in addition to being ruinous to public health. The damage it is doing the Taj Mahal is becoming clear. A combination of pollution and neglect is threatening its existence. Sulfur dioxide, along with other pollutants, are coming with moisture in the atmosphere to cause acid rain. And one of the things that I found shocking about this was that they actually had 2 pillars collapse.
I think the article mentions that. That's kind of scary. I didn't even know that. Well, let's go into it a little bit here in detail. We've got the time. Well, it's one of the most famous buildings in the world. Okay,
Absolutely.
It's attracting tourists, and I was one of them, as I mentioned. Built in the 17th century by Emperor Shah Jahan as a mausoleum for his favorite queen.
Yes.
Okay, she died in childbirth.
Yes.
In the past decades, and I saw it back in 1970, so it was still pristine, but it's become dark. It's losing its color and its shine, and this is the important part. Its foundations are weakening and cracks are becoming larger and deeper. The threat does not just come from the air, it is also waterborne because the building's foundations are laid on wooden bases which require water all year round. Strange, but they did this a long time ago.
Well,
If the foundation isn't watered, the wood below it will eventually dry up and break and rot. As water levels fall, timbers supporting the Taj begin to crack, and you're seeing that evidence right here. I'm going to put the picture up again.
That's the crack. And, you'd think that something can be done.
Well, it's a matter of will.
Yeah,
we're fighting industrialism in India. We're fighting tourism, and these guys don't get along.
Yeah,
it's a shame because there are actually people there saying, "Take it down." I don't think they will, but take it down, remove it.
Take down the Taj Mahal. You know what? Maybe Donald Trump would buy it and put it in Miami.
Well, Miami's going to be underwater. So we'll see that a little later.
We'll see that a little later.
Well, let's move on to the next one here.
An item from PV Magazine USA. Washington,
D.C. votes in favor of the nation's most aggressive 100% renewable energy target. This is interesting.
It is. The City Council of Washington, D.C. has been very pro-renewable for years. The City Council of Washington, D.C. voted to provide initial approval of the nation's most aggressive renewable energy target. With final approval, the city's utility would have to source 100% of the city's electric power from renewables by 2032. I should point out, when they say the nation's most aggressive energy target, they're talking about the district level, not the city level, because we've already got cities that have got more aggressive energy targets than that. They're talking about
considering the district as a state,
comparing it with states, and but nevertheless, this is a very aggressive 2032 100% electric power. It's aggressive.
It's doable.
Yes, it is.
It's
Absolutely.
doable.
It's doable.
And we're going to have to start doing stuff like this.
We are indeed.
By the way, it's a doubling of the current 50%.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's irony here. It's ironic that the pro-coal Trump administration could be governing out of a city which is pushing faster move toward renewables than any state to date.
Yeah.
And the amendment, this is interesting, it requires that 50% of all buses, ride shares, and fleets of 50 or more vehicles in a city move to zero or low emission models by 2030, 100% by 2045. Well, that's going to happen. They're all going to be electric by 2045.
Well, yes.
It's not indeed a law yet, but they're
working on it.
Well, let's look at another disturbing picture here.
We have a bunch of disturbing pictures today.
This is a dry lake bed, if you haven't guessed. We might have shown this one before.
We might have.
We did.
Yeah. This is from BBC News.
And it says, climate change. Last 4 years are the world's hottest.
Yeah.
Well, we've talked about that on the show,
We have indeed. And there are still people in this world who are denying that we're moving into hotter weather. I mean, it is...
Well, what did Trump say just last week? It was a particularly cold days. And
what happened to
global warming? He doesn't know the difference between climate and weather.
Yeah. The year 2018 is on course to be the fourth hottest on record. A report from World Meteorological Organization says. The State of the Climate report says that the 20 warmest years on record have all been in the last 22 years, with 2015 to 2018 all being in the top four. So the top 4 years have been the last 4 years, and the top 20 years have all happened in the last 22 years.
This is from BBC, and is just like CNN. You know, this is a broadcasting company. They have some interesting websites, and this is one of them. There is an animated map on this website that's interesting. It shows where the wildfires are around the world.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's a direct result of this warm climate, warm temperature.
Yep, and drier
And
weather.
in this particular case, they mentioned Scandinavia. Now, who'd have thunk? You know, wildfires in you don't think about Scandinavia.
I'll tell you where you don't think about wildfires, and they're happening, is Greenland.
There's nothing to burn in Greenland.
You'd think. But nevertheless, there are wildfires. If there's something that can burn anywhere in Greenland,
It's burning, huh?
Well,
Wow.
it's not
Wow.
necessarily burning, but there are wildfires going on in Greenland.
We got an interesting one coming up. Wish we had a picture of this one.
Oh,
Owls roost at Scottish wind farm.
this is from Friday, November 30th, and the source is Renews. Planning conditions attached to Crystal Rig Wind Farm's consent. That's the organization here that is called Crystal Rig.
Crystal
Wind
Rig, yep. They own the wind farm.
They own the wind farm.
Yeah.
Required an ornithological monitoring plan. I'm not going to try to say that again, which specified the requirement for artificial nesting baskets for long-eared owls.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting because the owls they're talking about are not long-eared
That's
owls.
just exactly what it says.
3 pairs of nesting barn owls, which these are no-ear owls.
They are. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll mention that in a second. We don't have a picture of them, but
Yeah.
they're funny-looking things.
Well, have successfully bred at the wind farm in the Scottish borders, and they've produced 12 hatchlings. So,
Well, the long-eared owls didn't seem too impressed. Those are the guys like this, with
Yeah.
the ear tufts.
Yeah.
These barn owls don't have any ear tufts at all. They look like they got masks on. They're funny-looking things.
they have kind of heart-shaped
Yeah, they look like they're wearing masks.
faces.
They do.
And they have very big eyes.
Well, anyhow, they didn't put these things for those guys. And those guys looked at them and said, "Hey, I like these.
Home.
This is home."
Yeah. They had an article that we actually reported several months ago about an eagle, a female eagle who had built a nest in a wind farm and had lived there for 12 years and raised several nests of hatchlings.
They're not supposed to like wind farms.
They're not supposed to, but apparently she hadn't been told.
Well, we got a gloomy picture coming up here.
Yeah. That picture?
Yeah. My version of it's darker, but it's
Really?
still pretty gloomy. Yep.
Well, it's a wind farm in Australia.
It's pretty it's a gloomy picture.
Yeah.
Australia is on track for 50% renewables by 2030. Well, that's not a gloomy article.
This is hysterically funny. This is from the Australian Financial Review. Australia could reach 50% renewable energy by 2030, even if installations were cut by 2/3.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Green
Well,
energy.
Australia, a lot of people are doing this on their own
Yeah.
because it makes sense.
Yeah. Green energy markets is the source of this estimate. At current installation rates, this is not reduced by 2/3. Wind power solar farms and rooftop solar, about 78% of Australia's power will be from renewable energy by 2030.
And they're doing it on their own.
The thing that's funny about this is the federal government of Australia is kind of like the federal government of the United States, and it's very resistant to renewable energy.
I was going to say exactly that same thing. The current government is actively seeking to promote the use of fossil fuels, particularly coal.
Particularly coal. And, I mean...
Coal is dead. Let's face it. Can you say Dracula?
Well, and I think the Liberal Party, which is the conservative party in Australia, but I think the Australian Liberal Party learned something in the elections that just took place.
I hope they did.
In New South Wales, because they really got trounced in those elections. So
They did. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, moving right along here,
Yep.
this is significant. More than 40% of the world's coal plants are unprofitable.
Yes.
Duh.
And actually more than 60% in India, believe it or not.
We'll touch base on that. Yeah.
This is from Reuters. Over 40% of coal plants are operating at a loss due to high fuel costs, and that could rise to nearly 75% by 2040. Honestly, Tom, I don't believe it'll be 75%. It's
going to be higher.
I think it'll be much higher, like 98%.
Yep.
According to a report by environmental think tank Carbon Tracker, The risk of stranded assets has institutional investors increasingly divesting from fossil fuel companies.
Well, you just said 98%, and there's an addendum to this article from the same source. It says by 2030, wind and solar will be cheaper than continuing to operate 96% of today's existing coal plants.
Yeah.
That's almost all of them.
Yeah. And on top of this, just consider this for a moment. You've got a supply chain here. And as the market for the supply chain collapses, the supply chain collapses.
Yeah.
So what happens? It means that if you want to buy coal for a power plant, there you've got a power plant in Peoria, and you want to buy coal, and you've been buying coal from some place in Illinois just down the block, all of a sudden that place goes broke. What do?
Well, the big problem here is stranded assets.
Yes.
The people who own the coal bought it to sell it.
That's right.
And now they're looking and they're saying, my God, there's no market for this. We're going to be stuck with it.
Yeah, we're going to be stuck with it. And the people who are operating the power plants are saying very much the same thing. And we will get into that.
We'll touch base on that
in just
again.
a moment.
Well, let's come a little closer to home. We got a picture coming up.
We
here.
have a picture. This is from Montague.
Montague.
I'm sorry, you're right. Montague is Montague. Montagu is Montague.
Well, this is from Montague, and it looks like it's a, what do you call it?
Hayfield?
Hay farm. Yeah,
Yeah.
It looks like it's a hay farm.
Yep.
I keep thinking straw, and straw is hay without the seeds.
Yes. Well,
A solar bonus is the latest clean energy incentive for Massachusetts farmers. And there are Massachusetts farmers in the picture, folks.
yeah, they are indeed. And it puts me in mind of my youth. We didn't have machinery that was that sophisticated. That thing is baling up the hay into bales and throwing it into the trailer behind the tractor.
Yeah,
When
that's
I was
just
a
what
kid,
it's doing, yep.
One of the jobs that I did was walking alongside a truck
And throwing that
and
stuff.
throwing those hay bales up into the truck, and those
Good for the
that's
shoulders.
Hard work. Anyway, this is from Energy News Network. A solar incentive launched this week in Massachusetts is the state's latest effort to make it easier for farmers to adopt renewable power and become more energy efficient. The incentive promotes PV projects that coexist with agricultural uses.
That is the future.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you got productive land.
Yeah.
What could a farmer want more than another crop on that same
On the same land.
Yeah.
And
And there's one picture later on coming up where there's all three. There's PV, there's windmills, and there's farms.
yes.
Why not?
Why not? Well, the thing that I've heard was if you look at that equipment, driving that tractor, which is not all that big really, that's a fairly small tractor. I mean, I grew up partly in Illinois, and in Illinois these days they've got tractors that are unbelievably big. But that is what I would call kind of an ordinary sized tractor.
Well, you could put PVs on poles.
You can put PVs on
that
poles,
would allow these things to drive under them.
and they've
we
actually tested
showed
that.
pictures of that.
Absolutely. But you can grow grass that sheep graze on, and it's just as productive with a shade from the PVs.
I was wondering about that. So corn needs light.
Corn needs a
sun.
lot of light, but
grass
there's
doesn't.
There's a lot of grasses that have actually been bred for sheep to graze, and they produce just as much in a field that is partly shaded
Yep.
by PVs. And there's other things we've talked about them.
Growing grass, growing grass in Vermont is probably the biggest crop.
I didn't know that, but nevertheless, I believe
Well,
you.
certainly around here it is.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some corn being grown, but mostly they're growing this.
That's another thing that I learned when I was like in third grade or fourth grade. Corn is one of 3 crops that are really destructive.
Corn isn't good to grow.
No.
Nice to eat, but it isn't good to grow.
The other 2 are cotton and tobacco.
And by the way, most of the corn you see growing isn't for people.
And most of the corn that you see growing for people is GMO.
That's true too.
It's like 93% GMO.
But
I don't eat corn anymore.
I
unless
learned a
it
long
comes from
time ago.
Mexico.
How can you tell the difference between people corn and cow corn?
Well, have you ever tried to eat cow
Well,
corn?
that's just what I was pointing out. If you look at a field full of beautiful big ears of corn, that's cow corn. That's horrible to eat. I learned that when I was a kid.
Yeah.
The people corn grows from small, scrawny plants that are in a farmer's backyard.
Well, when I was a kid,
Yeah.
living in Illinois and New Hampshire, going back and forth
Yeah.
between the two, I learned something, and that is if you wanted good corn, you would buy it locally in New Hampshire. Because
Okay,
the
yeah.
corn you got in Illinois wasn't any good.
Yeah, it was cow corn,
Well,
wasn't it?
there's the huge difference was the corn that we were getting in New Hampshire was coming from a farm stand, and it was fresh.
Aha.
And the corn that we were getting in Illinois was coming from
From a
supermarket, and it had been there for a week. Anyway, should we
Well, there's
continue?
an interesting thing about this
okay.
here. This particular program in Massachusetts includes a bonus of 6 cents per kilowatt hour for building on farmland with panels raised and angled in a fashion that allows crops to grow or livestock to graze or underneath. That's just what we talked about.
You can increase, I saw a study, you can increase your productivity in terms of dollars per acre by 60%.
Absolutely.
And
it's
now
another
they're
crop.
telling you, and by the way, if you do that,
We'll pay you.
We'll pay you extra. Okay, so
Well, we got one coming up here, a little more political here.
yeah, it's a little more political, but it's very interesting. This is from CNN.
Aha. Another one from CNN. And I've mentioned before, CNN usually starts their articles with a pretty good video.
Yeah,
And this one's good too. I'll mention that. But
Yeah.
more Americans and most Republicans now believe in climate change.
a growing number of Americans believe that climate change is happening, a shift from public opinion from 3 years ago. About 8 in 10 Americans, including two-thirds of the Republicans, believe the climate is changing, causing extreme weather.
Some of them are saying, yeah, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, well,
Sour grapes.
I was walking down Elliott Street.
I did that once.
Just for the record, Tom and I both live on Elliott Street. I was walking down Elliott Street about a week ago, and I came across a neighbor who's a woman who was born and raised, I guess, in Germany. And we got into a conversation, and I mentioned Green Energy Times, or maybe she did, which of course is the Green Energy magazine that's published in central New England. And she told me that she had actually picked up a copy and mailed it to her brother in Germany, just to prove that there are environmentalists in the United States.
That's interesting. The world opinion is that we're not, huh?
The world opinion is that we're a bunch of rascals or fools.
Well, getting back to this article, this video is interesting. It's 4 minutes. It's called Fact Check, Trump's False Climate Claims. And it's worth watching.
Yeah.
And some takeaways from here. A majority of Americans, which is 54%, consider climate change a very serious problem, which it is.
Yes.
Okay. Trump, who has called climate change a hoax, dismissed the study completely. I don't believe it, he said.
Yeah, I don't.
He told reporters he read some of the report.
Yeah, my bet is it was a title page, but we're getting into serious ground here, and this report it said we're seeing a spread of diseases, Lyme disease being one of them, with being driven by climate change, and people are getting sick because of climate change.
And people are getting sick in places that they never got sick from climate.
Right.
From
And you can go down the list.
Vermont's one of them.
Yep, New Hampshire fish and game people, I forget the exact title, told me that something over 80% of moose calves die from anemia because of tick bites.
The moose are not, how would you say it, genetically immune or inured.
They don't know.
They don't know enough to roll.
how to groom themselves for ticks.
Yep, that's interesting.
And it's and these are just simple examples. You could go on and on and on and on and on with this stuff, but I mean, we have a peach tree A volunteer.
Yeah.
Somebody
mentioned that,
dropped
yeah.
a peach pit on the front lawn in the
And
corner.
it grew into a tree.
And it grew into a tree.
That's supposed to happen in
No,
Vermont.
it's not supposed to happen in Vermont. And people are growing peaches now.
Well, now they are, yes.
Yeah.
Vermont peaches will be a thing of the future, I
They
think.
will be. We're growing
Commercially.
We're growing figs and
Yeah,
limes.
Yeah, but you
and
cheat. You
lemons.
bring them inside in the
Yeah, I
wintertime.
cheat. Yeah, I admit it.
Let's look at the smokestacks coming up here.
Oh, okay. Let's do that.
We got some nice smokestacks.
Nice smokestacks. Yeah, fluffy, fluffy emissions. A lot of all the stuff on the right in that picture.
That's
is
not
steam.
smoke; it's steam. Yep.
The stuff on the
Still
left
a nasty
side,
picture.
the tall stacks.
That's smoke.
That's smoke.
That's smoke.
Yeah. Anyway, this is from Yahoo News.
Well, before we get into this, there's things coming up we're going to be talking about that I found very confusing.
Oh,
There's COP24
yes,
and there's G20.
yes,
And COP24 is the United Nations thing, and it's about climate.
yes.
G20 is finance. It's the central bank governors.
Yes,
and they should be talking about money, but they're talking about climate too.
Right, and the COP24 is called COP24 because it is the 24th COP meeting.
And G20 is called G20 because there's 20 of them.
Yes, that's right. It's the 20.
So we got a few of these things coming up where these are going to be mentioning.
Right.
And they're both saying basically the same thing.
Yeah. So good point, Tom.
So let's talk about what's coming up. Polluters in the room. Big energy is undermining UN climate talks.
Yeah, and
We'll mention this more than once.
Yes, exactly. Oil and coal giants are exploiting a lack of conflict of interest protection at the UN climate talks to push continued use of fossil fuels. Several sources told AFP being a news source, just days before COP24, host country Poland announced 3 state-run coal giants
Now that's interesting,
will
isn't it?
sponsor it.
Isn't that interesting?
I mean, this is like...
Well, from the article, this is the world's only international action plan that still reserves a seat for major polluters. The polluters are in on this, and they're trying to sabotage
You know
it.
what? I'll tell you what it reminds me of, Tom. When I was a little kid, I remember that I read something, and I would hope this was a joke, but I kind of suspect it was not. I read something that said the Mexican Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals was having a fundraiser bullfight.
A little bit ironic.
A little bit ironic. Yeah, let's kill
Didn't
a
the
bull.
Mexicans wind up having a bloodless bullfight?
Well, they
I
might
think
have
they
done
don't
that,
kill a
but
bull anymore.
They
They
you
do
know,
in Spain, but not Mexico.
The Spanish, though, have this running of the bulls thing, which is kind of like a bullfight in which the bulls are allowed to kill people, but people are not allowed to kill bulls. Of course, we have our own version of that in Brattleboro called the strolling of the heifers.
Well, that's where it got its name.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And it's, I actually happened to be at a select board meeting once. And Orly Munson.
I went to one once too.
Yeah. Orly Munson, who's the head of the strolling of the heifers, was applying for her permit to have a parade. And I thought, I'm going to stand up and talk for this. And I said, in 1962, purely by accident, I happened to be in a hotel in Paris, only a block from the Champs-Élysées. And in the middle of the day, all of a sudden there was all this noise. And I looked out, and it was a parade. And I said, there's a parade. And somebody said, of course, it's Bastille Day. So I went to this thing, and I saw this parade, which was utterly
That's the 4th of
fantastic.
July for the French.
It was utterly fantastic. It had the best military bands I've ever seen, but it had French cavalrymen in their bronze Romanesque helmets and their bronze breastplates, sitting on top of these high-stepping horses that were. It was.
Sounds like fun.
The French had helicopters in those days. I know this is going to sound incredible, but the French had helicopters in those days that had jet engines on the wing, on the rotor tips.
Okay.
And when those things were running, they were unbelievably noisy.
Yeah.
And they flew them right over the parade.
Vroom,
It's
vroom,
amazing
vroom,
to
vroom.
me that the horses didn't spook. But I said, this was the most incredible parade I have ever witnessed until I saw the strolling of the heifers. Now, for anybody who's never been in Brattleboro, people come to Brattleboro from Australia to see the strolling of the heifers. Not a joke.
Well, I'd rather see a bunch of teenagers bringing up their little calves on Main Street than a bunch of guys with guns walking up the street.
Well, and not only that, but you've got the little kids from the Montessori school carrying their posters of the life cycle of monarch butterflies, and you've got
It's a nice parade. It really is a nice
it's
parade.
It's astonishing. It's so beautiful. But nevertheless, we should continue talking about energy and climate change here. Did I read the thing here? The oil and coal giants are exploiting a lack of conflict of interest protection at the UN climate talks to push for continued. Okay, so we should go on. Our next item is from Sunday, December 2nd.
Let's go to that one.
Okay, and this is from Clean Technica.
Trump administration plans COP24 coal slideshow.
What? Oh my gosh. According to Reuters, quote, 3 people familiar with the matter, end quote, had told them that the Trump administration is planning to set up a slideshow, side event, read sideshow, promoting the use of fossil fuels at the upcoming COP24 UN climate talks to be held in Katowice. I don't know how to pronounce it.
That's close, Katowice.
Katowice,
Yep.
Poland. And, you know,
That's in the southern part of Poland where they mine coal.
it is.
It's
yes.
called Silesia.
So, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about that below.
Well, should
But
we go on to our
go
next item?
Well, we got something right here.
Ah,
The COP24 talks are expected to focus on hammering out a rule book on the Paris Climate Agreement,
yeah.
which
And
the U.S. don't even want to talk about.
Yeah. Well, the
because
U.S.
we're
is
not
not
in
at
it.
the table. The U.S. is not at the table.
Bingo. U.S. wants to push a discussion instead on the role of fossil fuels and the role of civilian nuclear energy. There is no backing for the Paris Climate Agreement and no mention of the International Panel on Climate Change special report on global warming, which we talked about here,
Right.
which warns that limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees C would require rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society.
And
I'll say that again because it's true. Limiting global climate change to 1.5 degrees centigrade would require rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society. And these people don't want to face that.
And there's another point here that we really should stress, and that is, and this is according to basically all of the scientists I've come across.
Yeah.
If we don't do this,
It's going to be very bad.
it's going to be very bad, and it's going to get progressively worse until we face it. And when we face it, it's going to continue to get worse.
It may be too
for
late.
at least 25 years, maybe 100 years, and maybe it's too late.
We talk about that a little later on. It
Yeah.
may very well be too late.
Okay,
Well, we got a picture coming up here again.
we do.
And
Let's
it's-
put that up.
This is, this picture is fantasy, but it's not far from reality. Well, Mike, why wouldn't, that's better. I don't know what's going on here.
I don't either. We've got a
But that is the picture that we're supposed to be looking
Yeah,
at.
this is a picture of South Beach in Miami. If the temperatures rise by 2 degrees Celsius, now they've already risen 1 degree Celsius. So this is an item from The Guardian.
Well, it's a long article. There's
Yes.
lots of pictures in it.
Yes.
It's a very interesting article.
It's one of the ones that you were
Yes,
talking
one of the
about
ones,
being
absolutely.
worth reading.
And it's called Portrait of a Planet on the Verge of Climate Catastrophe.
As politicians gather for the annual UN climate conference, climate catastrophe looks inevitable. We have simply left it too late to hold rising global temperatures to under 1.5 degrees and so prevent a future of drowned coasts, ruined coral reefs, spreading deserts, and melting glaciers. Now there's a little bit of relief from the disaster-looking stuff that we've got, but it's not in this article.
There it is again.
Yeah, this is, you can see, you know, here are a bunch of houses whose yards are completely covered with water, and their front porches are covered with water, and their windows are covered with water, and they're in a city where all the streets are covered with water. And guess what, folks? This is not something that you can stop by putting up a seawall, because that entire city is built on porous sandstone, and the water goes right through it.
Well, presently, right now, as we speak, during the exceptionally high tides every month,
yeah,
which happen every month regularly,
yes,
always have.
They're called spring times, but they happen at regular times twice a month.
The storm sewers are running backwards.
Yeah.
They're bringing seawater into the town.
Yeah.
What a crazy thing.
Yeah. So they've had to put valves on them, but they're also raising the streets, and they're spending
They're spending a lot of money.
almost $500 million in one community. So.
Well, the takeaway from here is, for years, many experts believe we have passed, well, this year, many experts are starting to believe we have passed the point of no return.
Yes.
They're starting to talk about it. It's not guaranteed, you know,
Yeah,
but
it's not
we're
guaranteed.
getting there. The article here, as I said, it's interesting, some good pictures, and they have some discussions on 4 places in the world where the climate change is most intense,
yes,
or has the most intense impacts. Florida being one of them,
yeah.
Madagascar, Antarctica, where more ice is being lost into the ocean than is being replaced, and the Great Barrier Reef, which it used to be called the largest living structure in the world. Now it's become the largest dying structure in the world. The Great Barrier Reef may be disappearing.
The Great Barrier Reef, by the way, as I recall, and I could be off on this, but I'm not very far off, my recollection is that it's 1,700 miles long.
It's a huge place on the northwest coast of Australia. It's about half the size of Australia. It's a wonderful place for things like skin diving.
Yeah, or it used to be.
Used to be, yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's move on to India here.
So we've got an item here from Swarajya.
India to float its largest solar tender for 23,000 megawatts ultra mega solar projects in Leh and Ladakh, which, by the way, are the northernmost parts of India. They're way up there in that point.
As part of initiatives under the National Solar Program, India's Renewable Energy Ministry launched an ambitious plan to implement 23 gigawatts of solar projects in Leh and Ladakh regions of Jammu and Kashmir. And
that's up in the mountains. That's up in the Himalayas.
This is, I don't know, but I think this is probably in areas of India that are also claimed by Pakistan.
They have been fighting over this for this whole century, half the last century.
Half of last century. And
you're right, it's disputed territory.
Another thing to mention here is that 23 gigawatts of solar is probably about equivalent of something on the order of 4 or 5 nuclear power plants.
Yeah.
So, and obviously the reason the sun doesn't shine 24 hours a day.
But when it shines in India, it shines a lot.
It shines a lot. But for this reason, a 1 gigawatt solar plant is not going to output as much electricity as a 1 gigawatt nuclear plant. And in fact, the nuclear plant in India, I think the capacity factor on nuclear is something like 80%, 82%, something like that.
Okay.
In solar, it would be less than 20%, but not a lot less.
Okay.
So that's what that's about.
Well, there's a takeaway here.
Oh, okay.
India is hoping to achieve a target of 175,000 megawatts. That's 175 gigawatts, not 23.
Yes.
In renewable energy before 2022, which is coming up quick.
This is unbelievable.
Well, when you look at the current installed capacity of the whole country right now, 22 gigawatts. Okay, so here they're multiplying it by 100?
The energy minister for India said that they were going to
do it.
They were going to hit their 2030 goal in 2020. They were going to hit a 15-year goal set in 2015 they were going to hit that 15-year goal in 5 years.
Well, a lot of what's going on here in India is they're bringing electricity to the country.
Yes.
Places that never had electricity before.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a national priority.
Yeah. And they're doing it.
Yeah, we got another picture coming up here.
We do.
This is a picture of the G20 summit.
You know, and one of the things that I noticed about this picture is here in the middle you've got Donald Trump looking.
He's got his power tie on there too.
Yeah, he's looking kind of, I don't know what the expression on his face says, but there's a bunch of people who are smiling quite broadly, but the two people next to him look like they're trying maybe, but they're not quite managing it.
Well, that is the G20 summit.
This is from Business Insider.
The article here says Trump alone on climate change as the G20 find common ground on trade and migration.
A joint statement signed by all 20 member nations said 19 of them reaffirmed their commitment to the Paris Climate Accord. The U.S., which plans to withdraw from the pact under President Donald Trump, was the lone holdout. They signed a pact saying, I understand all 19 of you are in favor of this, but I'm not going with it.
Yeah, the takeaway here is the Trump administration has closed out this G20 summit at odds with many allies over the Paris Accord, which he's pulling out of, and issues like migration, which is happening in Mexico, and migration resistance from the United States. This is interesting. The United States was the only or main holdout on nearly every issue.
Well, that's, what happens when you get into a populist thing where you're kind of nationalist and make America great again. And honestly, I don't even want to.
It's interesting. Despite Trump and his objections, the final language of the statement notes a recent UN report, which we already mentioned today, that warned that damage from global warming will be much worse than previously feared.
Right. And this feeds into our next article, which is from the Inquisitor.
Trump's denial of climate science, product of decades-long lobbying and grooming. So he's not just making this up, he's got help. Where does Donald Trump's denial of climate science come from? According to a new Axios report, quote, a small but influential set of organizations and people have been pushing misinformation for years, and Trump has been listening, end quote. Well, among this small but influential set that you just described, the oil companies stand out.
Yes.
I mean, ExxonMobil has lobbied against climate change for years.
Yes.
And in addition to the oil companies, climate change skeptics have infiltrated the administration, which we've talked about here.
They didn't infiltrate. They were brought in.
They were brought, of course. The CEO of coal mining Murray Energy is one of them. We've mentioned him. And his name is Murray. How clever.
Yeah. How clever.
Along with coal, energy, and other companies, conservative think tanks like the Heartland Institute also contribute to the...
Which is
so there's a lot of
by
help
the Koch brothers.
That's the Koch brothers. Yeah, sure it is.
And their friends.
And they were claiming that climate change does not pose a threat to humanity. As long as we're making money, guys, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, we got another picture coming up here.
We've got a picture here of this is
Katowice.
Okay, and this is from etenergyworld.com.
Climate talks kick off in Poland with a boost from the G20 summit.
Negotiators from around the world are meeting in the Polish city of Katowice for talks on curbing climate change 3 years after sealing a landmark deal in Paris that set a goal of keeping climate global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius. The UN meeting runs until December 14th. So what they're trying to do, and Donald Trump is standing in their way, what they're trying to do is limit the damage to that picture that we just saw of South Miami.
Exactly. Ministers from Poland will try to push for a joint declaration on ensuring a, quote, just transition for fossil fuel industries facing closure as part of efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions.
Right.
Well, that's true, but it's also because of economics.
Yes.
Very much so.
We are up to Tuesday
already.
December 4th, and we've got an item from Clean Technica.
We don't have a picture yet coming up.
No, not yet.
Yeah, this one was written by a guy named George Harvey. You know him?
I think I do. Actually, there are other people who know George Harvey better than I do. I have to tell you.
Coal is on the way out. Natural gas is next.
As I looked through data on carbon dioxide emissions, I wondered how long it will take for the natural gas industry to follow coal's steep decline into its own. The answer to this question may be becoming clear, and rather quickly, with a series of developments that are going on in California. And what is happening here, obviously you've read the article, but what's happening here is the cheapest fossil fuels electricity that we've got
There's a certain kind of
is combined cycle natural gas.
natural gas, right?
Now, there is a 13-year-old combined cycle natural gas plant,
So it's relatively new.
which is fairly large. It's about the output of the Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant.
Okay, it's significant.
It's a significant plant, and a couple of years ago it started running into trouble because of the cheap electricity from wind power and solar power in California. So the
So they couldn't
cheapest,
sell the power.
the cheapest electric source they've got is not cheap enough to compete against
compete in the market.
renewable energy. So what did they do? They went to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and said, we want to run on a reliability must run basis, which means
We've talked about that.
they have a special contract
Yep.
that says these guys are necessary to the stability of the grid, so they're allowed to charge extra. And the people who pay for this, those are the customers, the individual customers. So what happened was this license has to be renewed every year. They went to the
Public Service Board or whatever it is.
California Public Service Board.
It's got a different name, but it's the same
CPUC,
thing.
Public Utilities Commission, and they have to sign on. And the Public Utilities Commission went to the utility
They
in
went
the
to
area.
the highways and the byways.
Yep, Pacific Gas and Electric.
Yep.
PG&E, and said, you've got to do something about this because the customers are paying extra for reliability year after year. So PG&E said, okay,
Let's see what's out there.
what's going on in South Australia? They've got this huge battery down there, 100 megawatts, 127 megawatt hours. Let's get a big battery and replace the cheapest fossil fuel plant available with a big battery. And so they
And it is a big battery.
Yeah, the one in South Australia is 100 megawatts. This is over 500 megawatts.
Okay.
The one in South Australia is 127 megawatt hours. This one is over 2,200 megawatt hours.
This is one big battery.
By one metric, it is more than 5 times the size of the biggest battery in the world. By the other metric, it's almost 18 times the size of the biggest battery in the world.
That's kilowatt hours, right? Isn't it?
Megawatt hours.
Megawatt hours, yeah.
And the analysts are looking at this and saying, yeah, this is going to save people money. It's going to save customers money because they can buy power really cheap when nobody wants it.
So let me see if I got this right. So a relatively new fossil fuel plant of a design that produces the least expensive electricity we can get from combustion is being replaced by batteries.
That's right.
Which do not generate electricity, but store it as it comes from where? Wind and sun.
Wind and sun. So no fuel, and it's more it's higher quality energy than you get from plants that have to synchronize every time they turn on. You know, this is a win for everybody except the owners of the plant that's there. What is the name? Medford? I've forgotten the name of the plant.
Well, the one in Australia is Homesdale.
That's Homesdale, but the one in California.
I didn't write it down.
It's the same one that was attacked by a sniper several years ago.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
That was kind of scary.
It was indeed.
Well, we're not talking about someday in the future here, guys. Renewables are pushing gas out already.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, I don't know if I copied it onto this. I don't think so. But yesterday, I saw a quote by Nikola Tesla.
Yes.
About, and I'll try to paraphrase it. we should not be paying for fuel to generate electricity. That wasn't exactly what he said, but that's what he meant.
But you know, Tom, the thing is, we have got to a point of grid parity, not just grid parity for solar and wind, but grid parity and superior reliability.
Yeah, we have.
It's that simple.
So
why
reliable
would
now.
anybody invest in a natural gas plant? Well, there is a reason, which is they've already invested too much, and they want to.
They want to continue.
They
that.
want
It's
to
stranded assets is the word.
Stranded assets. But you know, this fossil fuel thing, I think, is probably going to collapse in the very near future. Anyway.
Well, we got another picture coming.
We
up
do
here.
indeed, and we should go to our next article.
This picture is what we were talking about before. You got windmills, you got solar panels, and you got a farm.
That's right.
All in the same place.
Yep.
And this is India in this particular case.
Yes, you can tell by the clouds.
India to achieve emissions control targets well ahead of time.
Yeah, I hope everybody watching thought that was a joke too about the clouds. According to the Environment Minister, India will surpass its commitments on greenhouse gas emission checks and energy transition to renewables made under the 2015 Paris Climate Pact 10 years ahead of schedule, making it a world leader in climate action. It's already a world leader. There's no question about that.
Well, they're motivated.
They're motivated.
And they do have a problem that they're solving, is that a lot of India doesn't have power.
And a lot of people in India are dying
because of that.
Because of
the cooking in the kitchen and smelling.
Well, also because of emissions that are in the cities from coal,
Yeah,
from diesel
yeah.
cars, from all kinds of things.
You know, it's funny, we talked about the Taj Mahal.
Yes.
I do remember when I was there that you could smell the pollution.
Oh, yeah.
Even this 1970.
Yeah. And it's worse.
And much worse now because
Yeah.
the nearby town has become industrialized.
Yes. There was a big power plant put up not very far from the Taj Mahal. And
Yes.
by not very far, I don't mean across the street. I mean miles away. But,
Yeah, like 10.
Yeah, but when the wind blows in the right direction, the emissions from that plant hit the Taj. Okay, our next item is from PV Magazine International.
It is that. A vision of carbon neutral power around the globe by 2050.
A scenario in which no additional oil, coal, or nuclear capacity is built and renewables grow at a rate of 3 to 4% per year, which doesn't strike me as being very fast, really, would see solar comprise 69% of the global electricity system by 2050, according to an EU think tank. This would boost manufacturing, create jobs, and spread prosperity.
Well, this think tank was directing this particular conclusion at the COP24 negotiations.
Right.
They wanted them to talk about it.
They
which
wanted them
did.
to talk about it, yeah.
Solar has the potential to become the world's most abundant energy source.
Right.
We've talked about that. It will. It will. Wind power, this is surprising. Wind power could rise to 18% of the global energy mix. So the money's on solar.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The money's on solar. The cost of solar is dropping like a stone, and the cost of wind power is dropping.
It's going down a little bit.
It's going down like the solar's going down like a stone, wind power is going down like a piece of paper. It's dropping fast, but it's not dropping all that fast compared to solar. It's dropping extremely fast compared to a lot of other things. Okay, we are up to an article from Associated Press on Wednesday, December 5th.
This is the last day of the week, isn't it?
It is.
U.S. coal consumption drops to the lowest level since 1979.
Americans are consuming less coal in 2018 than at any time since Jimmy Carter's presidency, according to an Energy Information Administration report, as cheap natural gas and other sources of energy frustrate the Trump administration's pledges to revive the U.S. coal industry.
Well, he said he was going to do it. He's trying like hell to do it, but economics is right in his face. He can't fight it.
He's losing, the United States is losing coal-burning power plants as fast under Trump as it was under Obama.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah,
absolutely true.
This year will be probably not the record, but it'll be close to the record. Okay, should we go on?
Well, it ends up by saying, however, market forces inexorably tamp down coal demand.
Oh, coal is expensive.
Well, you can't fight the market.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, green is great, but you can't find the market.
Which, by the way, is green.
Huh?
It's a different kind of green. The market is green, but a different kind of green.
Different kind of green.
It's based on green ink. Where
Well, we got a picture.
we've got a picture here, and this is from Baystreet.
You mean green pieces of paper?
Green pieces of paper. That's right. Baystreet.ca, which is
Well, there is a
Canadian-
picture of a gas
a
flare.
gas flare, looking like it was taken through a window screen with dirt on it. Okay, what do you got?
Natural gas prices fall below zero in Texas.
This is the first
What
time.
does below zero
It
mean?
means they pay people to take it away.
Bingo.
Okay, surging U.S. oil production in the Permian Basin has helped crash oil prices. But the Permian is also home to a skyrocketing natural gas production, and output is growing so fast that drillers are trying to give it away for free. When they cannot do that, they just burn it.
And that has other effects.
Yeah, but there's something to, I looked at this, and I want to explain this. When I looked at this, I thought, why don't they just leave it in the ground?
Because it's going to leak out.
No, because they're taking out oil, and the natural gas comes out with the oil.
With the oil.
They
so
can't
they,
put it
yeah,
back.
it's like carbonated water.
Yeah, so what they've got, it's all this natural gas. They've got to get rid of it somehow, so they have actually paid people to take it in some cases.
In some cases, they're just burning it.
And in some cases, they're doing what we see in that.
Which has second-order consequences.
Yeah, it sure does.
Obama tried to force drillers to capture this wasted gas, but Trump rolled back the standards. And negative prices offer very little incentive for drillers to capture that methane.
Yeah.
And that's exactly
So
what's
they're
happening.
burning it.
They're burning it.
So it does no good whatever to anybody. And I don't know, this, we're going to, I've said before, I think we're going to be hitting a wall on oil, and the International Energy Agency said that we're going to be hitting a shortage of oil and natural gas by 2020, they said, which is 13 months from now.
But a lot of the need is evaporating.
Hopefully, yeah.
I mean, it's economics again.
Yep. And
Well, this
more
is the last
economics.
article coming
Yeah,
up.
and this is from Colorado Public Radio, and this actually has a little bit to do with economics too.
Xcel Energy vows 100% carbon reduction by 2050.
This is the first large utility that has done this. Xcel Energy sells electricity in 8 states. It's a big utility.
Big utility.
That, by the way, is spelled Xcel Energy. Colorado's largest utility announced ambitious new carbon reduction goals beyond their current target of 60% reduction in the state by 2026. Xcel Energy now plans for a carbon reduction goal of 100% by 2050 across the 8 states where it provides electric power.
Well, the economic tide is shifting against fossil fuels. We've talked about that so many times.
Yes.
And it's in favor of wind and solar.
Yes.
The Xcel announcement is part of a wave of utilities announcing big carbon reduction goals.
Right. But it's the first big utility to say we're going to go 100%.
That's what this article's all about. That's
Emissions
exactly
free.
right.
Now, there's something that we should probably say, because it's in the article and it's part of this whole thing. They did not say that they would stop using fossil fuels.
No, they didn't say that.
What they did say was, if we're going to use fossil fuels, then we will be capturing the carbon.
Okay.
And they also
They
said,
didn't say how, but they
no,
said
they
they're
didn't
going to
say how. And there was an article in Clean Technica, by the way, I think it was yesterday, which I didn't put up here, that said the cost of carbon capture is plummeting because it's
Is it really?
new technology. So Steve Hanley, who wrote the article, was optimistic that both carbon emissions from the stack and carbon emissions from the air would become things that we could do. But one of the problems I've got with carbon emissions, and I haven't heard anybody address this, is that what we're trying to do is take billions, many billions of tons of carbon out of the atmosphere. And how we're going to do that and get rid of that carbon to sequester it, I don't know.
Well, one way would be to eat more shellfish.
I think it's time for us to part.
I think we've
I'm going to put
about
up
done it.
our last little screen there that says, have a perfectly lovely week. And that is.
We'll say goodbye to everybody.
We'll say goodbye. Have a good week and come back next time.